So thank you everyone for coming, and it gives me great pleasure to be able to welcome Dr Jamie Wilmore of the University of Oxford. He is a lecturer of chemistry and President Emeritus of the Newman Society and of the Companions of the Order of Malta, which if you don't volunteer for them all.
There'll be plenty more of that later.
Oh, well, fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us, and please, over to you.
It's a pleasure. Good evening, everyone. I am grateful to Adam for the kind introduction and to the Society for the invitation to speak this evening, and most importantly to the chefs who cooked the delicious meal. The last time I was sitting here at the front was in 2017, back when I was president of the Society, and so it is both an honour now to be back as a speaker and a delight to see the Society thriving under the leadership of Adam and the rest of the committee. Being a past president, I remember well the perennial challenge of finding someone to fill the week 8 of Trinity Term slot, which is traditionally the Life After Oxford talk. The difficulty, of course, is that most of the speakers in Oxford suffer from a rather obvious deficiency, and that is that none of us have ever actually left Oxford. So in keeping with that tradition, I too am someone who has never quite left. But I hope tonight to offer some reflections that are broadly applicable to the Christian life, whether lived here in Oxford or beyond it. And so tonight's talk is entitled Serve the Lord with Joy. When does the rest of your life begin? There are many threshold moments in the life of a young scholar. At one point, starting sixth form feels like the beginning of adult life, then going to university, and before you know it, you're staring down the barrel of finals, graduation, and your entrance into the so-called real world. For me, the last such moment was my wedding, which was back in 2021, in the second year of my DPhil. And so when I started to think about threshold moments to bring out in this talk, my mind naturally wandered back to my wedding day, which was a public declaration not only of love, but also of how I intended to live out my Christian vocation. Those of you in the room who know me well will also know that I am something of an amateur liturgist. So when I was invited to reflect on life after university, I found myself returning to the phrase lex orandi, lex credendi, lex vivendi, or the law of prayer becomes the law of belief, which becomes the law of life. The title of tonight's talk, Serve the Lord with Joy, is drawn from the offertory motet at my nuptial mass, which is Giovanni Gabrieli's Jubilate Deo. This motet weaves together texts from the Psalms and the liturgy, and it forms a series of requests that begin with a resounding call, Jubilate Deo omnis terra, praise the Lord, all you lands. While I'll admit that I originally chose the piece for its musical brilliance, its message has stayed with me. It is a proclamation of Christian joy that is public, embodied and rooted in the reality of God's love. And so this evening, I'd like to let its lines structure something of a reflection on the Christian vocation, on how we are called to live, to serve, and to hope in a world that does not always understand the joy that we have as Christians. So the motet continues, the man who fears the Lord is blessed. May the God of Israel join you together and be with you himself. May he send you help from his holy place and watch over you from Zion. May the Lord bless you out of Zion, he who made heaven and earth. Serve the Lord with joy. That last line, serve the Lord with joy, has stayed with me as a prayer and an invitation, one that captures the heart of the Christian life, and I believe the heart of what it means to live fully after graduation. Tonight then, I want to explore how we can live this call in these threshold moments and beyond. While the imagery of the motet clearly lent itself well to a nuptial mass, I believe it speaks as a guide to the Christian life more broadly. We will therefore unpack this motet line by line, seeking to construct a framework to apply its calls to the life of the modern graduate. Along the way, we'll reflect on the need for community, the discovery of vocation, the struggle to overcome acedia, the integration of faith and professional life, and the ever-present call to charity. So we begin the first line, Jubilate Deo omnis terra. Praise the Lord, all you lands. So, you're religious. How does that impact your life? That question, which was asked of me at a formal dinner, It's perhaps one of the most significant and yet one of the most difficult I've been called to answer during my time in Oxford. I am a Christian, but what does that really mean? It means I believe that the God who, as the psalmist wrote, wonderfully and fearfully made me, took on human flesh, became man and died for my sins and the sins of all mankind. It means I believe in a God who desires us to know his love and closeness and who gives us the sure hope of eternal salvation. Hope, then, is not a vague feeling, but a vital Christian virtue. It is one that we must never lose sight of. When Dante descends into the Inferno, he passes through a gate which is inscribed with the words, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." It is a stark reminder that in a realm without God, we are also without hope, for it is God who is the source of all our hope. Gabriele begins his piece with the line Jubilate Deo omnis terra, a resounding response to God, the source of our hope. Christian joy is not private but public, and as Catholics we are called to be witnesses to hope, to the joy that comes with knowing Christ risen from the dead. During the Exultet, the proclamation during the Easter Vigil, the deacon prays, "Let this holy building shake with joy, filled with the mighty voices of the peoples." The joy of the Easter Vigil, the joy of the risen Christ, stands in marked contrast to the sorrow and despair of Good Friday. And I always think of the sorrow the disciples must have felt when Christ died, for they were yet to experience the glory of his resurrection. For a number of years outside the Oratory Church on Good Friday, a crucifix would be erected for passers-by to see. The scene, our crucified Lord looking out on St. Giles, invoked thoughts of the Tenebrae antiphon O vos omnes, which is often heard in concerts around Holy Week and is based on Lamentations chapter 1, verse 19. O vos omnes qui transitis per viam, attendite et vidite, si est dolor similis sucut dolor meus. All you who walk by on the road, pay attention and see if there is sorrow like my sorrow. And yet it was striking that even as this crucifix looked out onto St. Giles, most people who did pass away did not see. In the modern world, in the age of information, of entertainment on demand, of growing pressure to compare oneself to others, it is easy to lose sight of the bigger picture, to lose sight of Christ, even when he is right in our midst. This Sunday, those of you who are still in Oxford will, I hope, participate in the annual Corpus Christi procession. The procession takes Christ in the Blessed Sacrament out into the streets of Oxford, from the oratory to the chaplaincy, and is a uniquely public witness to our faith. But as we go out into the real world, we do not always need to be so grand in our gestures. Forming a habit of daily prayer, abstaining from meat on Fridays, not being afraid to stand up for the most vulnerable in society, advocating for what is right, even when it is unpopular. This will say to the world gently but firmly, Christ is in our midst. University is a uniquely precious time. Religious life is often described as the highest vocation, in part because so much is laid on in the structure of that life to guide a person to salvation. Oxford systems bear many remnants of its origins as a clerical training institute. Meals in common, frequent services, albeit for Catholics typically found outside their colleges, a community seeking understanding of the world around them. For Newman, this community is one of the most important parts of the university vocation. In his idea of a university, he writes, "The general principles of any study you may learn by books at home, but the detail, the colour, the tone, the air, the life which makes it live in us, you must catch all that from those in whom it lives already." While it's true that the environment and ethos of Oxford can uniquely cater to intellectual and spiritual development, moving beyond the university, we can shape a life ourselves which keeps us close to the love of God. Regular prayer, pursuit of truth, helping those in need, searching out one's vocation, all of these done in a balanced manner will enable our work to align with a balanced spiritual life and one in which we can show the hope of God to the world. In the rest of this evening's talk, I would like to consider how we might do this. So line 2 of the motet, Quia sic benedicita homo qui temet Dominum, for thus shall be blessed the man who fears the Lord. To fear the Lord is not to live in terror, but in reverence and awe. It is not something to be afraid of, but rather, as the psalmist reminds us, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. This is not a fear which drives us away, but a fear that draws us closer to God in humility and awe. Taken properly, it becomes the beginning of our vocation. For to live in awe of God is to be open to his calling, wherever it may lead. The Oxford graduation ceremony describes degrees as licenses or as grades, which may lead us to think that it is preparing us for a specific future in the world. But with the exception of perhaps medicine, and even then medical graduates are not bound to practice as doctors, they are not defining of one's future career. Rather, they open doors and possibilities. All of us must surely recognize, despite the challenges that many face in their degree, that there's a great blessing that comes with an Oxford education. And so graduates must find the way to best apply the skills they have learned to glorify God and serve the common good. For some, that may well be working within the field of the degree, but for others, it will be through applying the gifts that you have learned here. A humility of intellect, the gift of clear and effective communication, and of belonging to a community in the service of God, and taking these to live out whatever your specific vocation may be. Post-graduation, it is easy to fear irrelevance, failure, and loneliness. But as I will return to later, the key is to always remember that we work to glorify God. The fear of the Lord may be the beginning of our vocation, but that does not always mean that our vocation is crystal clear. Not all of us are called as dramatically as Samuel. In my own case, in the final year of my undergraduate degree, I was seriously considering a vocation to priesthood, and indeed I applied and was accepted for seminary. And I still firmly believe that considering a vocation to religious life, and for men a vocation to priesthood, is something that everyone should consider. I loved the church, I loved the liturgy, I loved serving others, and many from my home parish from a young age had told me I should become a priest. And yet I had also been dating throughout my undergraduate degree. So I ended up breaking off that relationship to apply for seminary. But through that application process, through the discernment that took place, I realized that actually while I did love all those things, God was not calling me to the priesthood. Rather, he was calling me to serve him as a layman. And so instead of going to seminary, I started a DPhil. I got back together with my now wife, and we married 2 years later. When I was an undergraduate, I often heard thrown around Catholic circles the notion that religious life or the priesthood is the highest vocation. This is something that I think benefits from some clarification. Objectively, this may well be true. Those in a religious life in particular have bequeathed to them a way of life that is structured in such a way to orientate the whole of their life to God. Their life, by its very nature, sets religious apart from the world and grants them the most time to dedicate directly to Almighty God. But this does not mean their vocation is better in a worldly or competitive sense. Vocation is not a trophy, lest we mistake status for sanctity. Rather, the highest vocation for a given person is subjective. For each of us, it is when we do what God has called us individually to do. So do take vocational discernment seriously. Seek spiritual direction. Pray to God for inspiration. But equally, once you have discerned, act on God's call. While prudence is a virtue, once we have discovered what we sincerely believe to be God's plan for us, why delay? Fear God, trust in him, and take a bold step in faith. I got married in the second year of my DPhil, which in modern times raises many eyebrows, and many would consider getting married even in your 20s to be rather young. Yet I have never been happier. Why? Because I've been blessed with a loving spouse and find fulfillment in living out my vocation, solidified by the sacrament of holy matrimony. I spoke of vocation as a path to holiness, and while this may seem most obvious in the priesthood or religious life, with their visible signs of consecration and structured commitment to God, the vocation of marriage is no less a path to sanctity. In marriage, the spouses are called to help one another become saints. They work not only for each other's good in this life, but for one another's salvation. The quote at the beginning of the order of service for our wedding came from Blessed Emperor Karl of Austria. who turned to his bride, Empress Zita, on the morning of their marriage and said, "Now we must help each other get to heaven." That, ultimately, is what every vocation is about. It is a path shaped by love, love that is willing to serve, to sacrifice, to seek God in and through the other. And the love in a marriage should not just lend itself to charity between the spouses, but should also show forth into the world. The final blessing of the nuptial mass puts what might be considered secondary, charity to the outside world, front and centre, with the priest praying over the couple. May you be witnesses in the world to God's charity, so that the afflicted and needy who have known your kindness may one day receive you thankfully into the eternal dwelling of God. This imagery of entering heaven alongside the poor bears stark resemblance to the In Paradisum, which is the chant traditionally sung during the Requiem Mass, as a deceased's mortal remains are carried out of the church, which goes, "May the angels lead you into paradise. May the martyrs receive you at your arrival and lead you to the holy city Jerusalem. May choirs of angels receive you, and with Lazarus, who once was poor, may you have eternal rest." This resonance between the start of married life and the end of earthly life provides a stark reminder to the newlywed Christian that they are now partners on a pilgrimage, not merely of mutual love, but charged with proclaiming Christ's love to the whole world. Marriage provides a path to holiness through embracing both love of spouse and love of neighbour. In the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, found in the Gospel of Luke, and from which the person of Lazarus in the In Paradisum originates, our Lord tells the story of a rich man who ignores the beggar on his doorstep. When they both die, their stations are radically reversed. Lazarus is carried off to the bosom of Abraham, while the rich man is left in despair in Hades. Our vocation is not merely there for our comfort, but contains a necessary element of the service of others. This understanding of a call to wider service within the context of whatever one's specific vocation may be has deeply shaped my own life. While at university as a student, I had a privilege to become involved with the Companions of the Order of Malta, who you have already heard a plug for tonight, but I shall go on. They are an extraordinary group of student volunteers who take time out during the busyness of the Oxford terms to serve the poor of Oxford. They run a drop-in session each week for the homeless and can also be seen out on the streets of Oxford providing food and drink to those in need. A particular highlight for me was always the Christmas lunch. We would gather 40 to 50 members of the homeless community together for a full 3-course Christmas lunch, and this would be accompanied by carols from the college choir. Often the guests would arrive in disbelief. "I'm looking for lunch for the homeless. Where do I need to go?" despite being in the correct place? Or is this all for us? Or am I definitely in the right place? One of the important traditions in the Order of Malta is referring to those we serve as our lords, the poor and the sick. They are to be treated as we would want to treat ourselves, how we would want to treat our friends, or indeed how we would want to treat Christ himself. Therefore, we strive to ensure they are noticed and feel part of our community. They are not just the recipients of a cup of tea, as though charity is some mere transactional activity, but the conversations we have over lunch with our guests are an essential part of the service. It brings them into our lives. It demonstrates our sense of their dignity in a profound and deeply moving way for both the volunteer and the guest. The modern world moves very quickly, and it is all too easy to overlook those around us, to fail to truly see or hear them. Yet behind every silent figure on the street is a story, a person deserving of companionship. The companions bring companionship to those people, and for those of you not leaving Oxford, if you don't already, I commend volunteering with them to you. For those of you who happen to be moving to London, the companions have a similar operation there, and I would be happy to pass on details if you want to come and find me after this talk. But charity must not simply be seen as an extracurricular activity. It is at the heart of the Christian vocation. As Pope Benedict XVI wrote in his encyclical Deus Caritas Est, for the Church, charity is not a kind of welfare activity which could equally well be left to others, but it is a part of her nature, an indispensable expression of her very being. Charity is a fundamental part of the universal call to holiness, and must form a vital component of any Christian life, whether that be as a student or a graduate. Since volunteering with the Companions, I have gone on to become a member of the Order of Malta. We are a lay religious order which possesses a distinct twofold charism: defence of the faith and service of the poor. Both of these proceed organically from an authentic reverence of God. We live in a world where fewer people show interest in religion and where we hold a number of countercultural views. In such a world, learning about our faith, being able to explain our position, and showing our love of others practically through charity is an essential part of living out our Christian lives. Even as an academic, a sense of the common good must be an essential part of my daily work. Line 3. Deus Israel coniugat vos et ipse sib vobiscum. May the God of Israel join you together and be with you himself. This verse, drawn in fact from the nuptial liturgy, speaks not only to a wedding, but all true Christian community, where God binds us together and remains with us. Whether in marriage, friendship, or fellowship, our unity is not just emotional, but rather is sacred, for it is sustained by God's own presence. As I touched upon earlier, for Newman, community is at the very heart of the university. Again, writing in his idea of a university, Newman describes a model of a university far from what many would perceive today. While knowledge can be gleaned from a book, for Newman, true education requires a common life. He goes so far, this is interesting for me as a lecturer, to argue that he would rather see a university with no lectures or exams at all, but where students simply lived together, rather than the converse, one which offered all the knowledge in the world, but one in which the students had no shared life. The Oxford system is fundamentally one of common life, built on the model of medieval clerical communities for the formation of monastics. The common life, meals taken together in hall, being its centrepiece, brings together students of many disciplines, fostering conversations and friendships which extend one's education beyond their study in a single field. And in our modern world, I think that that is very important and to be preserved. Numerous societies, such as this one, gather and bond over shared interests and values, and the values formed at school are refined through discussions between like-minded and indeed sometimes oppositely minded individuals. The benefits to faith are also immense. Through communities such as the chaplaincy here, the faith is nurtured in a way specific to the stage of life of those attending, in a way often not possible in normal parishes due to lower numbers of young people. Yet the common life we hold so dear in our university faces many obstacles in the real world. The world we enter after graduation can pose many demands on our availability. So often it assumes mobility and ability to perform long working hours, with little time left to do much else. Many friendships risk becoming occasional or virtual, meeting when the time fits, rather than through a shared rhythm of life. But these challenges should not be seen as a barrier to community, but an invitation to form an authentic community. They call us to be deliberate, to seek out and build forms of life that echo the depth of fellowship we've known at Oxford, grounded in shared values, sustained by grace, and open to others. One place where many find a continuation of the type of common life we experience tonight is through Catholic young adult groups. Whether in city parishes, diocesan initiatives, or national movements, these communities offer opportunities to pray, to serve, and to grow together in faith. These groups provide not only spiritual support and intellectual stimulation, like the Newman Society does, but can sustain us in the trials of working life. Therefore, I strongly encourage you to seek out a young Catholic community wherever you end up. In the age of information at our fingertips, we must be cautious not to replace physical community with less authentic digital alternatives. While online communication can make us more connected, it can expose us to good, thought-provoking content, and it can enable us to maintain contact with friends and family who are far away. We must equally be cautious of the many algorithms which drive content which can reward outrage, tribalism, and superficiality. Devoid of authentic community, some areas of internet Catholicism can foster a version of the faith which is not a message of love, but which is hyper-ideological, performative, or detached from the lived reality of the Church in the world. While such areas of the internet can give a sense of connection and identity, rarely do these communities offer service and charity. Maintaining a physical meeting place can ensure discussion of the faith remains relevant to one's particular place and in the needs of their communities. So I would encourage you strongly, if you end up somewhere without a young adult Catholic community, talk to the parish priest, try and begin a group, either in your parish or, if numbers don't permit, coming together across a number of parishes in a local area, and try and begin a group. It can be as simple as meeting over coffee to discuss a book, one of sharing a meal, or even just meeting to pray the rosary, creating a space to discuss the faith rooted in the realities of being a young adult in the 21st century. One recent society graduate started a young adults group in London called Deo Gratias, which has quickly grown to be a large community of young Catholic adults who meet fortnightly to discuss their faith and its expressions in culture. Despite what popular culture may say, it remains very possible to build a young religious community. The need for community is not confined solely to the religious domain. We are also called to work alongside our neighbours of goodwill in service of our local communities. Yet modern life can often leave us feeling rootless, shaped by long commutes, long hours, and frequent moves. Many attempted not to invest in their neighbourhoods or to see themselves as part of a local whole, which can lead to much of the individualism and isolation we see in the world today. Nationally, charities are reporting significant drops in the number of people volunteering in their local communities, alongside a marked rise in volunteer turnover. This signals not just a decline in service, but also a deeper challenge in sustaining a stable and committed local life. Personally, I also volunteer with St. John Ambulance. We provide basic medical care to those attending events across the community and educate members of the public in first aid and ways of promoting public safety. While in part I do this as a way of performing hospitaller work, so serving the sick in line with what was traditionally the charism of the Order of Malta, through it I'm also privileged to see the range of good works and projects going on in the local community. Just last week I was at a family farm open day. As a child, I was fortunate enough to grow up in an active community, with activities made possible only through the generosity of volunteers. We must ensure that such opportunities continue to be available to future generations. In the process of volunteering, we not only enrich our local communities through generosity, but we also find new friends and new interests. By promoting local activities, we can sustain our local high streets and ensure our neighbourhoods remain places where community can be readily fostered. Assuming your life post-graduation takes you to pastures new, I strongly encourage you to make time to volunteer in your community. It's an excellent way to settle in, give something back, and from my own experience, it is likely you will gain much more than you give. Verse 4. Mite vobis auxilium de sancto, et desiantur autor vos. May the Lord send you help from his holy place, and watch over you from Zion. So far we have discussed the manifold challenges in life that can come with graduation. For many, it can feel not only like a new journey in work, or to further study, or to a life of service, but like one is finally emerging into the real world. And that can be daunting. But we do not go alone, but rather under the watchful care of a God who sends us help from his holy place. As Catholics, we know that that help is not abstract, but is real and tangible, above all through the sacraments, where grace is given to us to strengthen us on our journey of faith. The accessibility of the sacraments in Oxford is perhaps unrivaled in England, other than possibly in London, but it's particularly easy to access the sacraments when that accessibility is coupled with a student timetable. While you may not have quite the same ability to attend daily Mass or have to plan more carefully when to go to confession, I would urge you as much as possible to preserve your prayer life after graduation, both privately and in common. Just as at university, receiving the sacraments, making time for private prayer and spiritual reading, builds up our relationship with God so that he can fortify us and send us help from his holy place. This help is not just for our own comfort, but also to strengthen us to witness to the faith in our world. The modern workplace can feel a challenging environment to live the Christian faith, yet alone to speak of it. In the modern world, it can seem appealing to treat faith as a private matter, best seen out of sight, and moral conviction shaped by the gospel can face misunderstanding or hostility. Yet our faith that God created the world, loves us, became man and died for us, demands a response so profound that it reflects the whole of our life. At the end of every Mass, we are sent forth with the words Ite, missa est, to go forth and take the love of God into our life and work. Yet often we may think it easier not to. But defending the faith need not mean regular public confrontation or apologetic argument with our colleagues. More often it is the quiet courage to speak honestly when asked what you believe, to stand up for the dignity of every human being from conception to natural death, to refuse to take part in office gossip, and to show charity to colleagues. We may not get it right all the time, and I certainly do not, but done properly, we show forth a joy that makes others wonder what or who it is that gives us our hope. We do not face these challenges alone. The Lord sends us help from his holy place, and he watches over us. He strengthens us through his grace, nourishes us in the sacraments, and calls us to be his witnesses, even in the heart of the secular world. Line 5. Benedicat vobis Dominus ex Sion, qui fecit caelum et terram. May the Lord bless you from Zion, who made heaven and earth. In the penultimate line of his motet, Gabrieli references Psalm 133. But more importantly for our purposes, he reminds us that it is the Lord who made the heavens and the earth. I am, of course, a Catholic scientist in a world increasingly hostile to the supernatural, a world that seeks to determine all empirically, and which has very little time for aspects where there isn't a concrete answer to, but how do you know? For many, certainly in popular culture, my position poses an apparent contradiction. I spend my days in the lab obsessing about the smallest minutiae in chemical bonding, performing experiments to interrogate the universe to force it to spill its secrets. Then I leave the laboratory to attend Holy Mass and receive the Eucharist, where I espouse a firm belief in the miracle of transubstantiation. I spend my days writing papers, clearly laying out empirical evidence for what may seem small and trivial. Yet, when it comes to my eternal salvation, I trust that for which I can offer no absolute proof. And yet, this contradiction is not what it at first seems. The study of the universe is possible entirely because it is intelligible, because it was created by a rational creator, and therefore can be studied by rational means. In a homily for the Solemnity of the Epiphany, that great feast of God in man being made manifest, Pope Benedict XVI reminds us, the universe is not the result of chance, as some would want to make us believe. Contemplating it, we are invited to read something profound, the wisdom of the Creator, the inexhaustible imagination of God, his infinite love for us. Thus, the study of the universe is not detached from faith. It is a form of faith-seeking understanding. Such an understanding is not new. It does not come from seeking to account for religion in the place of science, but rather it has a veritable past. For centuries, scientists in the Arabian Peninsula developed ever more complex methods to predict the motion of planets, to bring them closer to the divine, both through a sense of awe for the Creator and through better calculations for the timing of their prayer and religious festivals. In the Western scientific tradition, modern science has its origins in natural philosophy, a field with a clear understanding of its mission to search out the universe to better understand creation. The God who I worship in the Eucharist is the same God who holds together the atoms I study, and who imbues the universe with its order. Yet, while I can sit here and make it sound like being a scientist is some sublime and noble calling to search out the universe, it is something that can quickly lose its allure. In the modern age, we often find notions of scientism, an idea that all truth can be found through scientific inquiry alone, losing sight of the Creator. Without a clear vision, scientific inquiry can quickly become a source of tedium. Spending days pipetting one colourless solution into another colourless solution and measuring the temperature of the colourless solution quickly becomes a tireless task. It is easy to lose a sense of what one is doing, of seeking to pursue the truth and glorify God, and efforts begin to feel futile, and a certain listlessness can creep in. This challenge is not unique to the scientist, but applies equally to anyone whose work is repetitive. For many of you, the tools of your trade will not be the beaker and the measuring cylinder, but will be the keyboard and the mouse. Yet the challenge may well be the same. It is reassuring to note that this is not a new problem. In fact, we see a similar challenge facing the early Christian desert monks. These monks retreated to the solitude of the desert, leaving the world behind to pursue truth, seeking to become closer to God, and lived a strict and highly regimented life, keeping with the ancient tradition of praying the Psalms, reciting the same text repeatedly in a cycle of prayer. Such monotony, particularly when prayers went unanswered, often led these desert monks to similar feelings of despair and futility. In his 5th century writing, St. John Cassian describes the afflictions of a monk in this state. He writes, "He looks about anxiously this way and that, and sighs that none of the brethren came to see him. And often he goes in and out of his cell, and frequently gazes up at the sun as if it was too slow in its setting, and so a kind of unreasonable confusion of the mind takes possession of him, like some foul darkness." This condition, known as acedia, was thus termed the noonday demon, on account of its tendency to take hold at noon, when the sun was at its highest and reprieve felt far away. Perhaps this, then, is the same affliction facing our scientist, whose research is intense, yet yielding no fruit. Why does anyone care about this niche piece of information? Does this really matter? Is there any significance? When we feel isolated in our work, whether in a desert cell, at a lab bench, or inputting data into spreadsheets, the sense of futility can overwhelm, leading us to question the purpose of our pursuit. What began as a noble pursuit of knowledge, the scientia from which science takes its name, becomes nothing but a futile exercise in the mind of the scientist, and slowly over time they begin to disengage. But just as the monks of the desert were not abandoned, neither were we. The cure for acedia was never to flee the desert or to abandon prayer, but to persevere, to let prayer shape the heart, and to allow the monk to develop a renewed sense of appreciation for his pursuit of truth. In the same way, our response to the noonday demon, whether it be in science, in a prestigious but mundane job, or in the hidden work that no one applauds, must be to turn again to God, remembering that it is He who sanctifies our work and gives it purpose. May the Lord bless you from Zion, who made heaven and earth. The God who made the universe we occupy blesses the quiet integrity of every day we work towards a common good. His love is apparent, not just in the elegance of a theory the scientists might uncover, but in the quiet humility of a daily task completed with love. Whether you are pipetting reagents or coding software, balancing budgets or raising children, work done with love brings the glory of the Creator into the world. This is not merely some pious musing of mine, but rather part of the tradition handed on to us. In Gaudium et Spes, we are reminded, through their work, men and women are contributing, by their personal industry, to the realization of the divine plan. Work may seem trivial, but with a renewed sense of purpose, we can find we are participating in the unfolding of God's providence, and that is work that is never futile. Line 6. Servite Domino in Laetitia, serve the Lord with joy. We started tonight with an imperative, praise the Lord, all you lands. As we reach the end of Gabrielli's motet, we find another, this time one that is a call to action in our lives. Serve the Lord with joy. As I hope our discussions tonight show, this isn't merely a motet filled with pleasant sentiments for a wedding day, but contains a series of animating principles to kickstart a vibrant Christian life in the so-called real world. Tonight we've explored how this joy compels us to be public witnesses to Christ's hope, transforming the streets of Oxford and beyond. We have considered how it guides our vocational discernment, how it helps us to embrace the path that God has truly called us to, and considered the authentic community we are made to be a part of, both in the church and in wider society, where we counter loneliness with deep connections and intentional service of the community. Our journey must be constantly renewed by the sacraments and prayer, through which God sends us help from His holy place. And through all of this, our daily work is elevated, helping even our most menial tasks, when done with love, to glorify our God, who made heaven and earth, providing meaning to all we do and battling acedia. To those of you who are about to graduate, your time in Oxford has prepared you intellectually and spiritually for this next adventure. Please do not abandon the habits of prayer, study, and community that nourished you here. Instead, be intentional in building a life that continues to sustain your faith. Be that person in your neighborhood, in your workplace, who embodies hope, seeks out those in need, and integrates their Christian values seamlessly into their professional life. Let your life itself be a song of praise. Go forth and serve the Lord with joy. Thank you.